Right now, time to go down to Washington, where Edie Magnus, sitting in for Jed Duval, has the news. Good morning, Edie.
Oh, good morning, Charlie, and good morning, everyone. President Reagan has challenged Soviet leader Gorbachev to tear down the Berlin Wall. In a speech at West Berlin's Brandenburg Gate today, as part of the celebration of the city's 750th anniversary, the president said a united Berlin would be a symbol of hope and freedom to the world.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The president had some pointed remarks at the end of his speech for West German protesters who held street demonstrations opposing his visit. He said if they got the kind of government they wanted, they wouldn't be allowed to demonstrate at all. In other news, a three-time winner in Britain. Voters have returned Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher to office, the first prime minister in 160 years to win 3 consecutive terms. However, Thatcher will have to work with a smaller Conservative majority in Parliament. Jim and Tammy Faye Baker have made a brief return to the theme park they developed in South Carolina. The former television evangelist and his wife arrived at Heritage Village in a limousine yesterday and were quickly overwhelmed by a crush of fans. It was their first appearance since Baker resigned his PTL television ministry in March. A New York jury begins deliberating the case against Bernhard Goetz today. Betsy Aaron reports the verdict is likely to depend on the jury's assessment of Goetz's own version of events.
2.5 years ago, on December 22, 1984, Bernhard Goetz shot 4 men on a subway, leaving one of them paralyzed and brain damaged. The men, Goetz said, were trying to rob him, to play with him. In closing arguments, his attorney, Barry Slotnick, described Goetz as a quiet, unassuming professional individual who just refused to allow himself to be plundered one more time. Goetz had been attacked twice before the shootings and never left his apartment without a loaded gun. But according to prosecutor Gregory Waples, what the defendant did in the name of self-defense was ugly, cold-blooded, and savage. And, said the prosecutor, let Bernhard Goetz's own words in his confession tell you what happened.
I wanted to kill those guys, I wanted to maim those guys, I wanted to make them suffer in every way I could.
From the witnesses on the train, there were differing versions of what happened, of how many of the 4 were surrounding Goetz, of whether 2 of those shot were shot while running away. The confusing testimony is understandable in New York, where the code of conduct on New York subways is to mind your own business and not to get involved.
It is not unlawful in New York to use deadly force to defend yourself against attack if your fear is reasonable and if your response to that fear is reasonable. Now, after listening to testimony for 7 weeks, the Bernhard Goetz jury is going to get a chance to decide whether what he did on that subway in shooting 4 men was reasonable and therefore legal. Betsy Aaron, ABC News, New York.
And this evening on ABC's World News Tonight, Peter Jennings profiles our Person of the Week. And that's our news, and we go back to London now with Charlie Gibson. Charlie?
Thank you very much, Edie. It is now, looking at Big Ben, 34 minutes after the hour, coming up on 35 after, and Spencer Christian will have the weather in just a moment.